So probably you don't choose these, even though it's covered by bill of lading, as we said before. Commercial invoice checklists are also in there. So in terms of banking, this is what we are seeing. Okay. The steps. Banking here, as I said, is anyway relating to Chinese banks, for example, because we already talked about the process before. But if we talk about Chinese banks, we have here one industrial bank, for example. Before we were talking about Bank of China, we changed a little bit. So in industrial bank, we have it this way. This is the details. First step is the seller and the buyer sign the contract. After revising the contract and seeing all the items are put together, and the state condition that must be fulfilled. That's the first step. Okay. After that, the buyer contacts its local bank. Okay, the buyer, which is the importer, contacting the local bank with the application of letter of credit, or it can also be with letter of commitment. Duplicate of this are needed for import-export contract, and import is from the import contract is from the side of the importer, and then the export. Of course, they have the same contract when they are working on one thing at one time, and other relevant documents to the bank to apply for issuing this letter, to apply for the release of the letter from there. And so these are the second step before moving on to the third. The third step is where the buyer's bank contacting the seller's bank in China, if you are buying things in China, and the buyer's bank in Cambodia, for example, is giving the letter of credit from it was given by the seller's bank going to the buyer's bank, and the buyer's bank is issuing it, is giving it to the one who is entitled to it. Fourth, after receiving the letter of credit, the seller's bank contacts the seller and presents the payment advice. Okay. Yes. Presents the payment advice. Payment advice is like telling him or her when it can be cashed. I mean, changed into money or transferred into your account. It doesn't have to be cash per se, like that. And then point 5, step 5, the exporter's bank delivers relevant documents to the bank. And this is where production is starting, because you are remembering that if you are buying things that has not been made, it's a kind of there's no finished product available, then that production is starting now. And 6 points, after confirming that the documents is really what is needed, and the conditions are fulfilled, then the bank pays, the bank that is responsible is paying an exchange and makes payments to the importer's bank, exchange of payment with some documentation. And usually at this time, if we refer to China, production is completed. Okay, you don't receive the, what is it, the goods yet, just completed. And then the 7 steps, this is where the bank is advising the customer to go through the formalities for releasing the documents. to that the customer can take delivery. Releasing the document from their bank and you know, getting it, getting that document to the person who is finally going to be paid. All right, like that. And then this time, usually in daily life, uh, you know, transaction, the quality inspection and product testing is taking place or have taken place. And after that, the delivery of goods to the point of loading and shipment is taking place. This is the time when the importer is starting to have a smile on his face. All right. And the seller provides the required documents to his or her local bank at that time. Again, there is, you know, inspection um, for reporting inspection. The result of the inspection is out. The result of the test is out, and the freight documents are also given. And then finally, because there have been several payments, there's a release of, you know, funds if the conditions have been fulfilled, and the right to fulfill the condition, you always think about the right documents being presented. So that's what we see in this simple chart here. Okay, which doesn't really tell all unless you know have, you know, the details that we've just dealt with there. Okay, so you have the contract somewhere. It's not even here, but it's happening. And then that's how it starts. And then until the end. So the documents, a letter of credit application. The application is very, very important. And after that, you just use it. It's something like this. I already have it here. This is also what I can send you after the seminar, for example, seeing these, the letter of credit. So that's what we have in there. And now we're going to see the business application before we move on to the other section. Right, the Chinese traders, that's always what we have in mind when we have, you know, application. We know that the Chinese manufacturers require a 30% deposit or down payment before production. So it's something that we need to know when something is going wrong. Something is going wrong here. It's not because of the Chinese supplier, but also the one who is, you know, importing, having problem to comply with the contract. If there are some, you know, commitment that have been seen in the contract, then the deposit often returns into, it turns into a non-refundable down payment. Non-refundable down payment, as I said before, it's the same thing as remittance because most companies are already paying for materials before they are starting even production. So you're not going to be surprised, like, so I haven't received anything, and you said you haven't started any production, and now that I have a problem, I want my 30% back, and you say you can't give it. All right. Not everybody is good at explaining things, and sometimes people take it for granted that they don't need to explain. All right. So the reason is basically that they have already used the money, and so there are some trouble in getting that back. In some companies, they tell you right away that it's not back. In some companies, they don't talk about it, but that's what we are, you know, informed of now. Okay, to avoid undertaking that risk, many importers rely on letter of credits to pay their suppliers, which require no such deposit. But instead of having a deposit, the payment is released only when the goods are shipped. The goods are shipped, but there are documents that can secure it. And so letter of credit is giving some more reliance on, kind of security, but the importers need to understand some kind of complication when we are dealing with the Chinese market, for example. So the situation I already told you somehow that buyers are making demands and attempt to sell the bus, even though they are selling the bus domestically. This is something that we need to know. Like the buyers are taking small margins, and in order to create trust with them, we need to know that giving up the transaction is not really their intention, because when we talk about international trade, for example, it's a lot more. It can give somewhere, just like in any country, international trade can give a lot more than the local trade. That's why not everybody is extending their company into having that kind of permit or license. So basically, nobody is really willing to cancel things and and talk about returning or talk about not returning the 30%. So we just need to be uh, faithful to the contract. Now, the implication of this is, as we said, temptation of non-compliance or cheating is not very likely. It's not much. All right. So the bad news is letter of credit is not really acceptable in China, as we said. It is certain not a new. The letter credit has been around for many years. All right. And a lot of people are using it. But the manufacturers have their own other concerns to accept it. And that is, there are two main reasons apart from what we said before when we were discussing, remittance, for example. One is order volume, and the other one is the manufacturer's size. In China, we have three types: small industries, medium-sized factories, and mega, manufacturers, just like in the world. And if you are, that's also answering the question we are having before. What is the best deal that you might have, for example? Small manufacturers, if you want less price, and then you go to small manufacturers, the small manufacturers function as survival businesses in the world. It's also the same in China. So rather than companies invest, they are not a company investing in long-term growth, for example. They are kind of, okay, how am I going to pay our employees today and tomorrow and keep running and stuff, if you are talking about small industries. So whenever there's a profit, the owners are paid dividend, for example. They get the money probably from other industries that are bigger industries working with them. So they need to be paid at least some part of the money. So they don't really accept credit like to be paid at the very last process, yet the products have been shipped. Before shipping products, there are many expenses being covered. So as such, the companies run on little capital, and they are, I mean, recently it has been changing. A lot of companies are coming out of that situation. So relying on a credit fund can be a little difficult for every companies. So the components they are buying probably is hardly covered by credit that they might get somewhere. then it's always, they are strict about payment, more stricter than the big mega company that are, they don't really care. The banks are responsible, and they really really they are confident with the bank. So they find it hard to obtain. That's the problem in there. That if they are finding it hard to obtain credit locally, then they are relying on some other ways to get that money, and they are using this remittance, like at least paying some part of the expenses. So probably also small industries are not really using, they don't really have experience with letters of credit, because it's somehow a little complicated. But the medium sized and the mega companies in China, they have no problem with that. They are always welcoming it, because the banks are, they know they have capital, huge capital. Once they go to the bank, they might even have more than what they want. They just say, "Ah, no, I don't need this amount of money," because I've heard of that. Some business person somewhere in the place where I was before, they go to the bank, and the bank is proposing to give them money more than they want. Of course, they do that because they trust the company, and the company will pay some interest. But the company is not interested in that, for example. But small companies are not like that. They are not getting what they want from banks always. So if you insist on letter credit, you'd better source medium and large mega manufacturers in China. That's the implication. Communication is also important. Right from the beginning, tell your supplier, tell them that your company itself is requiring certain method, like letters of credit. You ship the goods, and then later you get paid. It makes sense in China, because a lot of companies are having policies. The people who are working in the company probably don't have the power to change that, but they have the power to make your transaction safe. So you explain to them that it's more of a company policy, but what is your position in there, that you can really really guarantee that there will not be a problem. That's what it is. Okay, so here we have a case. Let me just see the time first. For this case, I'm not going to, this is not let's say not an exam session. I will read the case, for example, and then I will give you the answer. If it is a normal class, a class of, when I teach this course, this seminar, I teach it on a regular basis. Settlement, for example, I spend 48 hours. Okay, but now we have how many hours? 6 hours, for example. As I said before, I have decided to give you as much as you might need. Then so that we can deal with the last, which is collection, the last part of it. Then I will just raise your attention to this. Some part of this is a case I took from somewhere, and then I will read the case, and we will see the answer, and then we move on to something else. Okay, at least you can remember something from the case. Now, the background of the case, this is the type of credit being dealt with here is irrevocable letter of credit. And irrevocable, negotiable, it means you cannot change it, you cannot alter it, you cannot amend it, But you can, if the beneficiary accepts, and there is a huge step that you should take to make that happen. It doesn't happen automatically. So it's irrevocable, negotiable. All right, so it uses what we call Uniform Customs and Practice 600. The issuing bank here is Bank 1, and then advising bank, Bank A. Availability, it's negotiable at site, meaning that the documents is there, the documents are there, and payment is taking place. It's not like usance. Usance is like documents are there, but the payment will be later at the time of maturity date, for example. So I'm going to tell you what it is. So from the issuing bank, Bank 1 issued its revocable negotiable credit and advised it to beneficiary through Bank A. Bank A advised the credit to the beneficiary, the exporter, and among the other conditions, the credit required that, firstly, the certificate of origin and duplicate issued by certain chamber of commerce of that country. That's what in there, and then signed packing list. Okay, certificate of origin and signed packing list. That's requirements of the credit. So the beneficiary presented his documents to Bank A for negotiation. All right, and Bank A examined the documents that they were in the compliance to see that they were in compliance with the terms and conditions of the credit. And Bank A negotiated and forwarded the documents to the claimed reimbursements from Bank 1. The reimbursement here is more of a payment, okay? It's not really reimbursement per se that you are finding something. And then the issuing bank, its position upon receipt of the documents, Bank 1 examined them and determined that there were discrepancies, okay? There were some problem with the documents. Then Bank 1 immediately notified Bank A by teletransmission that it rejected the documents for the following reasons. What are the reasons? Firstly, the certificate of origin was dated after the date of shipment, because they have this shipping bill we talked about before. Shipping bill has dates of shipment. So the certificate of origin was not matching the date of shipment. Second problem, they said, was that the packing list was undated. The packing list, no date on the packing list. So Bank 1 informed Bank A that the documents were being held at their disposal. There's a problem. So the negotiating bank, upon receipt of the notice of rejection, Bank A replied as follows. These are what they said. We found your rejection of drawing unreasonable for the following reasons. There is nothing wrong with a certificate of origin bearing the issuance date after the date of shipment. That's what they said. The certification of origin was conducted prior to the goods being loaded on board with subsequent issuance of the certificate. Moreover, there is nothing in the credit or UCP, which is holding the law relating to this credit issuance, that support your position, which is your rejection. The certificate of origin bears a date of issuance that is within the validity date of the credit and in accordance with UCP 600. So the the certificate of origin was dated after the shipment, but it's still within the validating a kind of you know, the date, the period of date that should be considered in the whole contract. So there is no requirement for the packing list. That's the last part of it. According to the law of you know, credit, there's no requirement for packing list to bear assurance date. The packing list content is not inconsistent with the other documents of credit. Therefore, it is in compliance with the terms and conditions of the credit. So there are some answers here already of this problem. So the question we might ask that are corresponding to the answers that I was just referring to is, was Bank One correct in its rejection of drawing? Is there any article in UCP 600 that addresses the issuance date of the certificate of origin? And the last question is, does the packing list need to be dated? At least for credit, I mean, this letter of credit, you know, concepts. So the UCP document, I will send that to you, the UCP document. And when you have it, you can have a look at Article 14. It's also somewhere, it's somehow said in the Article 20 and 25, but Article 14 is the one that is very strong there. So the answer to this is that there isn't. It wasn't. It wasn't correct in the bank that was rejecting the drawing was not correct in its decision. There is no reasonable, that's the reason is that there's no reasonable basis for rejection of the documents presented due to the fact that there is nothing wrong with the certificate of origin bearing the issuance date after the date of shipment. Okay, the date of certificate of origin can be not at the time it was issued, but it can be changed to whatever. What is important is that it is a certificate and it is having some kind of legal merit in a way that everything is in it, the contents. And then the third part, there is no requirement for the packing list to bear assurance date when referring to the UCP 600. What we need to know here is if this method of payment is not based on letter of credit, there might be a problem, and the problem would be validated and it has some kind of legal merit. But if you use credit, you know, a letter of credit, which is governed by UCP 600, then it doesn't make any sense because UCP 600 does not say that the packing list should always be dated. This also tells us that it's not difficult to date any documents. So in order, even though the law there is saying it's okay not to date any documents, always put a date, because even though it says it's okay not to put any date, it doesn't mean that if you put any date, it's not acceptable. All right. But for some people who don't know the law and doesn't know international trade settlements, not like you now, then they might create trouble because they don't know about it, or they forgot, or whatever. Or somebody might want to cheat on you and they want to delay things, then you can refer to the documents. So for this is the law. And check. You can have your lawyer sending a letter to the person like, you know, what you're doing is not right. Probably you didn't receive any training for international trade. In this case, some people might be, their license is revoked because they are not complying with the law. They are not